What do you make, Tom, of these accusations that Harry is using his children to, well, as a weapon, I guess, against his family?
That's very much my motive. I tried to find out the truth. And it was only by finding so many different aspects. Have to, one way or another, silence Harry and Meghan, because otherwise these attacks from California will...
Tom Bower has just made a statement that sent shockwaves across the internet, and this time it cannot be dismissed as idle speculation. He is not a fringe commentator or a click-driven blogger chasing attention. He is a writer with a long history of challenging powerful institutions and public figures, and his past work has earned both praise and controversy for one reason: he does not speak lightly. So when Bower turns his attention to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's children, people pause and listen carefully. What began as quiet online murmurs has grown into something larger, as observers point out inconsistencies, missing details, and timelines that do not seem to align as cleanly as expected. These are not accusations, but questions that refuse to disappear. What should be straightforward family facts now feel oddly opaque, and that uncertainty is exactly what has captured public attention.
Okay, so Lily arrives, right? And, it was orchestrated with the curating exactitude.
Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a like, because the context behind these claims matters more than the headlines. So who exactly is Tom Bower, and why does his voice carry weight in moments like this? He is not offering casual opinions. His reputation was built on deep research, uncomfortable truths, and a willingness to challenge narratives others avoid, and that is why what comes next deserves careful attention. The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. Tom Bower has built his entire career on investigating people who actively try to stay hidden from public view. These are not minor figures or passing headlines, but powerful individuals whose influence is protected by layers of silence, reputation, and carefully managed narratives. Bower's reputation comes from doing what others won't, digging patiently, verifying relentlessly, and publishing only when the evidence holds. His credibility wasn't earned overnight. Years earlier, his book on Prince Charles became a #1 bestseller, not because it relied on gossip, but because it carefully documented how Charles rebuilt his public standing after Diana's death, and how Camilla navigated her own long road to acceptance. Readers trusted it because it explained the why, not just the what. So when Meghan entered the royal picture, Bower immediately recognized a story worth following, not because it was sensational, but because the situation raised questions, and answering them, as he knew, would not be easy at all.
All sorts of relations in Britain. He hasn't got a purpose. He's embarrassed with his charities in Africa.
When Bower began digging into Meghan's background, he repeatedly ran into closed doors. He reached out to former friends, acquaintances, and people from different chapters of her life, hoping to build a fuller picture, yet most declined to respond at all. According to Bower, this silence was not accidental. He has said Meghan made it clear that no one should cooperate with his work, creating a wall that was difficult to penetrate. One of the few voices willing to speak was her father, and even he approached the situation carefully. He emphasized that regardless of conflict, she was still his daughter, underscoring how sensitive and guarded the situation had become. For Bower, this level of resistance was telling. It suggested not just privacy, but control. That instinct to uncover what remains hidden is exactly what drives him. Now his attention has shifted toward Harry and Meghan's children, and the unusual secrecy surrounding their births. Even by royal standards, Bower suggests this level of silence feels different, and that difference is what has left so many people asking questions.
Can you just tell them the truth? Can you say to the world, you're not giving him a title, and we want to keep him safe? And
What makes this situation stand out is that timelines which should be straightforward appear unusually unclear. Details that are normally routine, dates, confirmations, and basic medical acknowledgments, are either minimal or presented in ways that do not neatly align. Public records that in theory should correspond smoothly have instead raised questions for some observers. It isn't only Bower noticing these inconsistencies. Online researchers and royal watchers have been comparing timelines for years, pointing out small discrepancies that, on their own, might seem insignificant. Yet when viewed together, those details have led some to feel that parts of the story do not fully connect. The uncertainty grows when patterns repeat rather than resolve. When someone with Bower's investigative reputation begins asking similar questions, the conversation shifts. What once sounded like internet speculation starts being treated with more seriousness. That brings us to the birth announcements themselves, because this is where accounts from different sources sharply diverge. According to some claims, the information released publicly contained inconsistencies that went beyond minor errors, raising further questions rather than offering clarity.
The end was abandoned by Meghan for months. before the wedding, totally left to his own devices, isolated.
What deepened the confusion was the growing sense that the official narrative did not fully match what was being described elsewhere. Buckingham Palace, an institution known for precision in its public communications, appeared to endorse information that some later questioned. The public was given specific details about dates, locations, and timing, yet alternative accounts suggested that events behind the scenes may not have followed the same script. One detail, in particular, stood out to observers. Reports indicate that the widely assumed plan to use Portland Hospital, a long-standing choice for royal births, may never have been the intention at all. Instead, Meghan was said to have considered a home birth, a personal decision that is neither unusual nor controversial on its own. The question that lingered was simple but persistent. If a different plan was in place, why was Portland Hospital mentioned publicly at all? That single inconsistency only added to the broader sense that key details were left unclear, setting the stage for even more questions to follow.
So the royals who questioned Prince Archie's skin tone have been revealed. Listen, remember when Meghan Markle told Oprah that some people...
This is where the questions intensify. Observers began asking why a detailed narrative around a hospital birth was presented publicly if events may have unfolded differently. It wasn't only the location that raised eyebrows. Official palace announcements included specific descriptions that some later accounts suggested were not fully accurate. According to various reports, the statements released to the media painted a clear picture of what allegedly happened at Portland Hospital, yet alternative timelines implied a different sequence of events. That contrast alone wouldn't necessarily be alarming if it had been addressed openly. And that's where uncertainty set in. There was no follow-up explanation, no clarification, no acknowledgement that plans had changed or circumstances evolved. Just silence. For many royal watchers, that absence of clarification became the real issue. When details are left unresolved, it naturally leads people to wonder what else might remain unclear and why those gaps were never filled.
Do you know who Meghan Markle's two children are? First, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's first child is Archie Harrison.
Tom Bower has spoken openly about this issue, and his focus has remained consistent. He has pointed out that the information shared publicly about the birth date and timing did not always align cleanly when placed on a clear timeline. When announcements were made, their timing raised questions, and details that are usually simple became unexpectedly unclear. What stands out most is not any single discrepancy, but the overall level of control surrounding the narrative. Births, even within royal families, typically follow a familiar pattern: an arrival, an announcement, and public acknowledgement. In this case, particularly with Archie's birth, each element appeared carefully managed, limited, and unusually vague. That level of curation naturally invites curiosity. The question many observers keep returning to is not accusatory, but logical. Why invest so much effort into managing something ordinarily straightforward, unless privacy concerns or unresolved details made transparency more complicated than usual?
Her kids from the toxic press suddenly posted a cute little Halloween video that just happened to show Archie and Lilibet's face.
At this point, it's fair to ask why any of this matters at all. Why should birth details spark such attention? In most families, they wouldn't. But within royal systems, lineage is not symbolic. It determines titles, succession order, and formal standing within the institution, and it has operated that way for centuries. This isn't about exaggeration or stirring controversy. It's about how monarchy functions by design. Royal tradition relies on clearly documented lineage to establish eligibility for specific titles and roles. That structure leaves very little room for ambiguity, which is why the issue moves beyond privacy. If unconventional arrangements were made or details were handled outside standard protocols, questions naturally arise about how those decisions intersect with long-standing royal conventions. Within that framework, eligibility is typically straightforward. Requirements are either met or they are not. The uncertainty comes not from drama, but from unresolved details, and that uncertainty is what continues to fuel public curiosity.
I don't know why I get so excited over the birth of babies of people that I don't even know, but Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, they just welcome their...
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. What adds another layer to this discussion is that conversations are reportedly happening quietly among people close to the family. These are not casual observers or online commentators. They are individuals familiar with royal customs, protocols, and the internal weight these matters carry, discussing potential implications behind closed doors. That detail alone is significant. When questions begin circulating among insiders, the conversation moves beyond speculation and into something more serious. It suggests that uncertainty is being acknowledged privately, even if it is not addressed publicly. At the heart of this is the preservation of long-standing traditions. For the royal family, these customs are not symbolic gestures or outdated habits. They form the structural foundation of how the institution operates. You cannot selectively set them aside without consequences. Their purpose has always been consistency, clarity, and continuity, and those principles have not changed even as public expectations have evolved.
The man who in the end exposed Meghan's lies, and of course they're furious with him. So the whole series ends.
The challenge with questions of lineage is that they rarely fade on their own. These concerns don't disappear simply because time passes or public attention shifts. When issues touch the foundations of an institution, they tend to linger, sometimes for generations, because they relate to how the system itself is meant to function. These questions can't be dismissed through silence or fatigue. If uncertainty exists about how individuals fit within the established family structure, the impact extends far beyond any single household. It affects the wider family, the credibility of the institution, and the public's confidence in its internal processes. At its core, the monarchy relies on trust and clarity. Especially when it comes to matters of lineage, transparency is not optional, it's essential. And that is why when sources begin quietly acknowledging unresolved questions, attention sharpens. Because unanswered details and systems built on tradition rarely stay buried for long.
Harry, looking exhausted and restless, climbing into that jet like he was running from something. The flight plan, London.
Reports that discussions are taking place within royal circles carry real weight. These are not casual exchanges or rumor-driven conversations. They reflect a need to assess how unresolved questions could affect the family's structure and decision-making going forward. The very fact that such conversations are happening signals how seriously the situation is being regarded behind the scenes. As this unfolds, another pressure point complicates matters further: finances. Harry and Meghan are widely understood to be reliant on their commercial agreements, particularly high-profile deals with Netflix and book publishers. These projects are not supplementary income streams, they represent the foundation of their financial independence. When the couple stepped away from royal duties, they also stepped away from the institutional financial support that comes with being working members of the family. That decision was framed as a move toward autonomy. But autonomy requires sustainability. Without alternative long-term revenue sources, the stakes surrounding their public image, credibility, and storytelling have become significantly higher, adding yet another layer of tension to an already complex situation.
When this clip first surfaced, most people thought it was AI, not satire, not parody, AI, because
The financial pressure became even more visible after the move to Montecito. The property itself is substantial, and the ongoing costs, particularly private security, are widely understood to be extremely high. Maintaining that level of protection and lifestyle requires consistent, significant income, and those expenses don't pause. According to various reports, expectations about Harry's personal wealth may not have aligned with reality. There were assumptions early on that his financial resources were far larger than they ultimately proved to be. The actual figures were reportedly much more modest, creating an unexpected gap that had to be addressed quickly. That reality helps explain the urgency surrounding major media contracts. These deals are not optional extras, they are the primary mechanism for sustaining independence. Looking further back, sources have suggested that Meghan had long been focused on building a high-profile, successful life. There is nothing unusual about ambition, but it does provide important context. When she and Harry connected, it appeared, at least from the outside, that long-term goals and opportunity had finally converged, setting the stage for decisions that would soon reshape everything.
Prince Harry was recently seen with his 2-year-old daughter, Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. Many critics
This is where the situation becomes especially restrictive for them. Walking away from major contracts like Netflix projects or book deals is not a simple option. These agreements are binding, and stepping back would dramatically alter their financial reality. Even if there were a desire to reduce public exposure or pause the constant scrutiny, the structure of these deals leaves little flexibility. Without that income, their lifestyle would likely need to change significantly, from downsizing their home to rethinking long-term plans in Montecito altogether. This context matters when people question why deeply personal stories continue to surface. It's not solely about visibility or relevance. Financial sustainability is directly tied to producing content that attracts attention and engagement. In that sense, the pressure isn't abstract, it's structural. Once commitments like these are made, choices narrow and every public move carries heavier weight than it might appear from the outside.
Okay, so this beautiful and innocent tweet says, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle just released the first photo of baby Lily.
That financial pressure doesn't exist in isolation. It spills into every other decision. It shapes what is shared publicly, what is defended, and how ongoing questions are addressed. Quite simply, there is very little margin for error. These agreements are too important to risk, and allowing them to unravel is not a realistic option. That tension helps explain the intensity surrounding many of the choices being made, yet alongside the financial strain, another pattern has quietly drawn attention. Observers have long noted how rarely Archie and Lilibet are seen interacting with the wider royal family. This isn't about formal appearances or ceremonial photographs, it's about ordinary unscripted family moments. When compared with Prince William and Catherine's children, the contrast is striking. George, Charlotte, and Louis are regularly photographed with grandparents, cousins, and extended family at birthdays, holidays, and casual gatherings. These images feel natural, almost routine. The absence of similar moments on the other side has raised questions, not accusations, but curiosity about how these family connections are currently being navigated.
Says, quote, Harry clearly met his father with the hope that he could ingratiate himself back into the family, but it isn't going to work.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. What stands out most is the contrast in warmth and visibility. With other branches of the family, you can see bonds forming in real time, shared smiles, relaxed interactions, relationships growing naturally. That's what most people expect to see in any close-knit family, royal titles aside. In contrast, public glimpses of Archie and Lilibet within the wider family circle are extremely rare. There are no widely seen images of casual moments with King Charles, no spontaneous interactions with cousins, and no unguarded family scenes that feel organic or unplanned. What is released appears carefully curated, measured, and controlled. When young children are involved, children who would normally be forming bonds with grandparents and relatives, that absence becomes more noticeable. Observers have also noted that King Charles has kept a visible distance, a choice that appears deliberate rather than coincidental. In a family where tradition and lineage carry lasting significance, that distance naturally raises questions that cannot easily be ignored.
Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scandal has entered the mainstream media domain.
Something about this distance feels deliberate, not accidental. The wider royal circle appears unusually restrained. No joint appearances, no public messages of unity, no visible efforts to maintain a shared family presence. From the outside, it looks as though communication has narrowed to almost nothing, as if an invisible boundary has been quietly put in place. Some observers believe this separation serves a purpose. The theory is that the royal family may be protecting the institution itself, creating distance now to reduce risk later. By stepping back early, they limit association if unresolved questions eventually resurface in a more serious way. It's a cautious defensive posture, one rooted in experience rather than emotion. If that interpretation holds weight, it signals something important. It suggests these lingering concerns are not being dismissed behind palace doors. Instead, they are being treated with a level of seriousness that reflects just how high the stakes truly are for the monarchy moving forward.
The whole description she does of the Portland hospital, the birth, that was completely fabricated.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. You don't create this level of separation from family, especially where young children are involved, unless there is genuine concern driving it. Distance of this kind is rarely accidental, and it's not a decision made lightly. What makes the situation more sobering is what it means for the children themselves. Growing up without regular contact with extended family, without shared holidays, casual visits, or familiar faces, leaves gaps that time cannot easily repair. Whether shaped by circumstance or choice, this is the reality surrounding Archie and Lilibet today. That brings us to the images that reignited public curiosity. The pregnancy photographs, once accepted at face value, are now being revisited with sharper scrutiny. Viewers are noticing details they either overlooked before or hesitated to question at the time. As conversations resurface, one theme keeps emerging. The overall presentation felt unusually vague, and in a story already marked by distance and silence, that lack of clarity has only intensified public interest rather than quieted it.
Has often been seen as the people's prince. Meghan Markle, an American actress and humanitarian, was the woman who changed.
The timeline surrounding the pregnancies appeared imprecise, and the medical information typically shared, even at a basic level, was strikingly minimal. That absence stood out, especially given that even highly private public figures usually release a small set of standard details. In this case, however, nearly every element remained tightly controlled. What did surface felt unusually refined. The photographs, official announcements, and carefully structured statements all carried a distinctly polished quality. Nothing appeared casual or unguarded. There were no candid moments, no spontaneous glimpses into a deeply personal experience. Instead, everything arrived fully packaged, as though it had passed through multiple layers of review before reaching the public. That level of curation may be expected for brand launches or corporate announcements, but when applied to the arrival of a child, it felt noticeably different. The result was not intimacy, but distance, and that distance only deepened public curiosity rather than easing it.
Opposite. Every day without answers makes the monarchy look weaker, shadier, and less trustworthy. King Charles, still new to the throne.
Observers have also pointed to specific inconsistencies, small details that appear misaligned when photographs are compared closely or placed alongside publicly known timelines. Individually, these details may seem insignificant, but when examined collectively, they have prompted wider discussion. It is important to note that not every claim holds equal weight, and some interpretations move into speculative territory. Still, the volume of questions being raised has shifted the conversation beyond isolated online chatter into something more broadly debated. Adding to this atmosphere is how rarely the children are seen in public. On the infrequent occasions photographs are released, their faces are often obscured or partially hidden. Privacy alone does not explain the reaction. Many public figures protect their children. However, when this approach is viewed alongside the unclear timelines, limited disclosures, and carefully curated public releases, it reinforces a perception of intentional distance. Even celebratory moments, such as Lilibet's 4th birthday post, have been examined through this same lens, drawing renewed attention rather than quiet reassurance.
Divorce. Wow. Let's make a new Netflix series and story out of.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. Meghan shared the image on Instagram, a gesture that on the surface felt warm and celebratory. Yet even in that intimate moment, the child's face remained largely unseen. To many observers, the post appeared less like an unguarded snapshot of motherhood and more like a meticulously composed brand release. That distinction did not go unnoticed. The language, the framing, the timing, everything felt deliberate, controlled, and polished to a degree rarely associated with spontaneous family moments. When every detail appears managed, curiosity naturally follows. This is not cynicism, it is human instinct. People notice patterns, especially when authenticity seems filtered through layers of strategy. In this case, the consistency of curation has raised more questions than reassurance. Ironically, the tighter the control, the stronger the public scrutiny becomes. And as this pressure builds, sources suggest the strain is being felt behind the scenes, particularly by Harry, who appears increasingly affected by the weight of it all as the narrative continues to evolve.
Harry has often been seen as the people's prince. Meghan Markle, an American actress and humanitarian,
Reports emerging from Montecito paint a picture that is anything but calm. Those close to Harry describe an atmosphere thick with tension, one that seems to intensify with every new headline. He is reportedly monitoring everything: articles, online commentary, video breakdowns, and speculative threads, absorbing each one as if it carries personal weight. That constant exposure is taking a visible toll. Sources say his sleep has suffered, his patience is thinning, and his behavior has shifted in ways that concern those around him. Pacing, irritability, and emotional exhaustion have become increasingly noticeable. What makes this moment especially striking is the irony at its core. This is the same man who has spoken passionately about mental health, urging others to seek balance, step back, and ask for support when overwhelmed. Now, by many accounts, he appears caught in the very spiral he once cautioned others against, a sobering turn that deepens the gravity of what's unfolding next.
There's no way that bump is real. Lady Colin Campbell with me now. She has been on this.
The pressure is coming from one relentless source: the inability to step away from the noise. The constant monitoring of what is being said, written, analyzed, and replayed has created a sense of losing control over his own narrative. For someone who has lived under public scrutiny since childhood and who has already endured profound personal trauma, this moment appears especially heavy. He is experiencing it all in real time, with no off switch. Meghan, however, is responding very differently according to multiple reports. Her approach is described as strategic rather than emotional. Legal teams are engaged, cease and desist letters are being issued, and lawyers are working quietly behind the scenes. It is a tightly managed response designed to contain damage and reassert control. Yet this strategy may be producing the opposite effect. The more aggressively the conversation is suppressed, the more curiosity it fuels, transforming restraint into resistance and silence into suspicion.
Once. And this time, it hit different. Because this wasn't just gossip about outfits, interviews, or...
Every legal letter that goes out appears to have the opposite effect. Instead of quieting the conversation, each move seems to ignite more curiosity, more scrutiny, and more people asking the same question: why respond so aggressively if there is nothing to clarify? That pattern alone is drawing attention that might otherwise have faded. At the same time, something more personal is happening behind the scenes. Longtime friends, particularly those from Harry's military years, who once formed his most trusted inner circle, are reportedly stepping back. There are no public statements, no dramatic confrontations, just a slow and noticeable thinning of the support system that once anchored him. That kind of quiet distance can feel louder than open conflict. Those close to the situation describe emotional volatility, moments of anger followed by deep withdrawal. Harry has built his identity around fatherhood, protection, and building a new life. When that foundation feels threatened, the question becomes unavoidable: what remains to hold everything together?
Believed that Meghan Markle, doing her twerking, was in the postpartum room, waiting for this baby.
The evidence of this metamorphosis is already clear, but the numbers only tell part of the story. From the outside looking in, it is genuinely difficult to watch. This is someone who has already carried a lifetime of public trauma, now navigating yet another storm under relentless scrutiny. The emotional weight of that reality is hard to ignore, especially when the pressure seems to be coming from every direction at once. So where does this leave the carefully constructed fairy tale? The story of breaking free from royal constraints to build a life rooted in authenticity and freedom is beginning to fracture under the weight of unresolved questions. What makes it more painful is the sense that much of this could have been avoided entirely. There were moments early on when clarity could have changed everything. When inconsistencies were first noticed, when timelines felt unclear, when secrecy began to raise eyebrows, a simple and transparent explanation might have stopped the speculation before it took hold. Instead, silence filled the gaps, and with each passing day, that silence has allowed doubt to grow stronger, deeper, and far harder to contain.
Because that's the only way that Harry can make his income.
I was told this week that Charles is incredible.
What once appeared to be a dignified silence now reads very differently. The quiet approach that initially felt measured and respectful increasingly comes across as defensive. Privacy, which once seemed reasonable and understandable, is now being interpreted as concealment, and that shift in perception is critical. From a public relations standpoint, this is deeply damaging. Their image was carefully built around relatability, openness, and the promise of authenticity beyond traditional royal constraints. Yet the extreme control surrounding fundamental details of their own narrative undermines that very foundation. When transparency is replaced with rigidity, authenticity begins to feel constructed rather than lived. The cracks are no longer subtle. They are visible, widening, and difficult to ignore. At this stage, there is only one viable path forward: provide clarity. Address inconsistencies directly. Offer straightforward explanations that resolve confusion rather than deepen it. Without that step, uncertainty will continue to grow, and with it, the erosion of trust that no carefully curated image can repair.
Incredibly hurt by what's happened with Harry.
They now stand at a clear crossroads. One path leads toward openness, a willingness to explain, clarify, and resolve lingering doubts. That option, while uncomfortable, could still restore credibility and finally bring this chapter to a close. The other path is the one they appear to be choosing: continued silence, tightly controlled messaging, and avoidance. But that choice comes with consequences. In matters of royal lineage, uncertainty does not fade with time. It hardens, it gets recorded, it becomes footnoted history. 20 years from now, researchers, commentators, and historians will still revisit these unanswered questions, not out of malice but because the record was never settled. This isn't speculation, it's institutional reality. Royal history is measured in centuries, not news cycles. What makes this situation especially tragic is how avoidable it all was. Early transparency would have diffused nearly every concern before it had the chance to take root and grow.
So let me ask you, what do you think about all of this royal drama? And were you surprised by the names revealed, or did
A willingness to engage openly, to address legitimate concerns rather than shutting conversations down, could have changed everything. Early clarity has a way of stopping speculation before it gains momentum. Instead, silence took over, and now we are watching the consequences unfold in real time. That choice has shaped the narrative more than any rumor ever could. When questions are left unanswered, people don't stop asking, they ask louder, longer, and with greater scrutiny. So the real question now is simple, but uncomfortable. Is this secrecy driven by understandable personal reasons, or has it created valid concerns that deserve honest answers? How do you see this playing out from here? Does privacy justify the confusion, or has trust already been damaged beyond repair? Share your thoughts in the comments. Respectful discussion matters here. If you found this deep dive insightful, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who enjoy thoughtful analysis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.